Hey folks, welcome to Benelux Tech Office Hours. My name is Sohan Maheshwar. This is a show where we spend an hour and seeing if you all have any tech questions that you can ask us. Today I have Sebastian Stomack, who is the Principal Developer Advocate in the France region. Seb, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being there. So I'm Sebastian. I'm from Belgium, living in Paris. I speak French. You might have noticed a slight touch of French accent. And I'm happy to be with you. Also to take question in French. If we have any French question, I can take and answer in French. So if you're uncomfortable to ask your question publicly in English, do not hesitate to engage in your native language.
Yeah. So, Seb, first question. Tell us about that beautiful white background that you have. It looks so clean.
It's something super technical. It's called a wall with white painting. And no, I happen to have a spare room in my flat, and that spare room is just white, pure white. And I'm using one of the four walls as background with a bit of lighting. You can see from my hands there's lighting, and that gives that beautiful white.
Nice. Yeah, your lighting is just on point, I think, Seb. So, Seb, I know you're working on Reinvent, and you've been with Amazon for a few years. This year's Reinvent is, of course, very different. Are you looking forward to it? It's going to be very different. It's going to be virtual, 3 weeks long. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we are planning for more than 500 sessions, and I don't know if that has been announced publicly yet, but it's not really a secret. We are going to have a couple of sessions in different language than English. So for the very first time, there will be tracks, mini tracks, I should say, because it's quite short tracks, but still in 7 different languages, so Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. So we are going to address mostly the entire American continent from north to south with Portuguese and Spanish and English. Korean, Japanese, Chinese, big chunk of population as well.
Yeah.
And for Europe, Spanish, of course, but also Italian and French. And we will have 10 sessions in each, 10 unique sessions. It's not a translation from other content. We are really creating content. It will be delivered by our solution architect, AWS Hero, with some customer in. And we are finalizing the details right now. So I'm pretty excited to have native content, non-English content, bring to Reinvent for the very first time.
Nice, nice. For those of you all just joining in, this is an Ask Me Anything session. So we have Seb and myself. If you have any questions about AWS and tech, feel free to hit us up in chat. It could be something simple. It could be some implementation problems that you're facing, but yeah, feel free to hit us up in chat. Or if you just want to have a talk and tell us where you're viewing from, please tell us. I'm currently in Amsterdam, and Seb, you're in Paris, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm in, sorry.
Paris?
I'm in Paris.
Okay.
Totally, yeah.
Nice.
So send any question. I'm not pretending to have all the answer, but I have a bit of experience with AWS, so I can at least know where to find the information if I don't have the information myself.
Yeah.
In 1 hour, we are not going to do consulting for you and do write code for you, but we can go into pretty much any type of details. And if we don't know, we don't know.
We don't know. All right, Seb. So have you been working on anything cool of late? Any cool projects?
Right now, I'm preparing a talk. Maybe people saw that on social media. We have a dev day, virtual dev day, of course, coming in October. I don't remember the date. I think it's October 14, correct?
15th, I think.
15, with 3 tracks: architect, sysadmin, and IT manager, enterprise architect, and application developer. I know you will have a session. I will let you talk about your session as well. And I have a session that will talk about identity federation. If for those of you that are following me on social networks, you know that I'm keen to work on authentication and authorization, and Cognito and Amplify. And so this time I want to go a bit further with authentication and try to see how we can integrate native federation with Cognito. When I say native, I mean you're developing a mobile app and you use login with Google, login with Amazon, or signing with Apple. But if you do so, you have an authentication between your phone and the IDP server like Apple. And at some point, if your app wants to call an API or call S3 or DynamoDB, you need a token issued by Cognito. So how can you transform or exchange securely the token that you receive from Apple, Google, or Facebook natively in your app with Cognito, so that Cognito will at the end issue a token so that you can call other AWS services. And I'll try to talk about that in 30 minutes.
Nice, nice. So, folks, I have sent the link for Dev Day, which is all about modern application development. I've sent it on the chat. I'm also doing a session on offline first web and mobile apps. So if you have a web or mobile app which sort of uses a lot of data store and offline usage, do check out my talk as well. We have a bunch of questions coming in, Seb. So let's get to it. First, Tippy2 says, I'm glad you guys are here. Hey, thanks so much for streaming in, Tippy2. Please ask us any questions if you have any. Coding Expedition says, Lambda/DynamoDB authorization problem that has been bugging me for a while. Cognito API, Lambda, DynamoDB. Suppose a web shop, customer should only have access to his own orders. How to dynamically limit Lambda permissions to only current customers' orders?
How to dynamically limit Lambda permission to only current customer order? It depends. Sorry, I hate to answer my answer like that, but it's most of the time.
So one sec, Seb, wait. It depends.
You have one. Sorry. So if you're using AWS Amplify and GraphQL API based on AppSync, maybe that's too much buzzword already to start an answer. I apologize for that. But so we have a library called AWS Amplify. It's open source. You can have that inside your mobile application. And Amplify does all that for you automatically. So you define your authentication source, Cognito. You define the schema of your API using GraphQL. And it will generate an AppSync. So AppSync is the managed server to implement a GraphQL service, a GraphQL API, and it configures everything inside AppSync to actually filter by the currently authenticated user. So each user will only see his data, even if his or her data, even if there is one single table on the back. And Amplify is an opinionated framework, so it goes over GraphQL. It provides you CRUD operation on your data model, and it implements the data model in a DynamoDB table. So that's clearly the easiest. But I realize that maybe it's not the choice that you made. Maybe you have REST API, or maybe you have a relational database. So it will not work as is with Amplify, because Amplify, as I said, is opinionated. And Coding Expedition says, indeed, I know how to do it with Amplify and GraphQL, just wondering about doing the same with Lambda. Okay, so you understood the problem, perfect. Sorry for the introduction, but it helps also the others to answer. So if you want to do it with Lambda, actually I wouldn't encourage you to directly call Lambda. I would encourage you to call Lambda through an API, GraphQL, or a REST API with the API gateway, and to implement the access control at the API gateway level. So the API gateway can receive a token, can verify the identity of the token, and authorize or not the call downstream to Lambda. I never implement really complex authorization system inside the API gateway, but I know there is something called as a custom authorizer in API gateway. So you can configure API gateway to call a Lambda that will decide if the caller is authorized to do the operation or not. Basically, it's a Lambda function that will receive the HTTP parameter received on the API gateway, including the token. You analyze, you implement your business logic, you do whatever you want there, and the Lambda, the custom authorizer Lambda returns true or false value, saying, okay, it's authorized or not, and then API gateway will grant access to the resource. In your case, it's a Lambda function. So that's the way I would do it. I would not put the authorization logic inside your business Lambda function, the one called by the API gateway, but I would try to authenticate and to authorize at API gateway level using a custom authorization. You want to add something, Sohan?
No, I think that covered it. Yeah.
I thought
Coding Expedition, let us know if that.
I thought the microphone was a problem on my side, but apparently someone reported as well. There is a when you're talking with that microphone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can switch the microphone.
Folks, just let me know if you're still getting the static. It could be two things. This mic tends to clip at higher volumes a little bit, but also my laptop's going crazy and burning, so it's one of the two.
Probably the laptop.
It's probably the laptop. Let's blame.
No, when you're not talking, it's not making any noise. It's when you're talking, there is like
There is static. Yeah. Okay. This mic clips a lot.
I'll let you fix that. Coding Expedition. I hope I answered the answer. I hope I answer your question, sorry. You said right, indeed. Then the Lambda has access to all items, but I think for security purpose, we should give only access to the user item. Okay, that's indeed. The Lambda has access to all the database. You can implement filtering logic in the Lambda function. Probably you don't want that, or we if you want to restrict the Lambda to some field in the database, I don't think it's possible through AWS permission system or the token or anything. As soon as the Lambda has access to your database, it has access to everything if it is a relational database. And if your database is a DynamoDB database, then you can tune some permission, but the permission are associated with the Lambda as a whole. So anyway, you can restrict access to some table or some fields in the table, but it will be for the Lambda as a whole. It do not depend of the caller. So I'm afraid there is no way to further restrict at the Lambda level. Did you follow up that conversation? You want a short summary for you, Sohan?
Little bit. Is my audio clear now? I've switched to a lav mic.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
So the Coding Expedition, I'm going to use you by the nickname, said, okay, I understand the concept of authorizing at the API gateway level, but then the Lambda function, the business Lambda function, will have access to all fields for all customers in the database. What if I want to restrict the Lambda permission to only access the field of the caller? And I said, I don't think it's possible because the Lambda has permission to access the whole database. So the filtering logic has to be implemented in the Lambda.
Yeah, I don't see how you can filter out before that, though, right, Seth?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not with IAM techniques or policies or stuff like that. Yeah, I can imagine very complicated things, but I'm not sure it's worth trying to implement that, like generating dynamically a policy. Assuming the database is DynamoDB, you can have a first Lambda function that generates a policy to restrict fields and table access on DynamoDB, and then invoke a second function attached to that policy. But the latency will be horrible. It's like in French we say une usine à gaz, or something really, really complicated to debug and to maintain that in the future. I would not go that way.
Yeah, it's Lambda functions all the way down. So one Lambda function talking to one more talk. Yeah, Coding Expedition. That sounds like quite the Coding Expedition. Never mind.
Another question. I'm trying to use Fargate container that is Linux based. I guess it's a container which is Linux based. The application is written in .NET code. I need to write a file that is housed in an EC2 instance file share. Is there anything special that I need to do to get to the EC2 instance? So let's try to resume that. So you have containers deployed on Fargate. The code inside the container is written in .NET, and you need to install to access files that are on an EC2 file share. I hope I summarized that correctly. Didn't we release something recently for, maybe it was for Lambda, EFS access to Lambda, but we have something for ECS, EKS, no?
We did launch something about EFS for Lambda.
Okay,
very
that's
recently.
Lambda.
Yeah, I'm just going to put the link here.
But do we have EFS for ECS? Yes. So bear with me. I'm not a container expert, so I hope I'm not going to say anything too stupid. But let me resume EFS first. EFS is Elastic File System. So it's a managed file system that you can attach to your Linux or Windows instance. We have a EFS implemented as NFS, and there is EFS implemented as Windows file sharing. Maybe
FSX.
it's a different name. Yeah, it's a different
FSX,
name.
I think.
FSX, file system for Windows. But in both cases, it's a managed server, so you don't manage the server, you don't manage the service, either Windows, either Linux, and you can attach to the volumes or to the volumes exposed by that service. And it happens that you can also attach these to containers, to ECS. So you can configure it ECS so that each time it starts a task, the equivalent of a pod, and a container, it can attach that shared file system. So that I think that would be the easiest way to have like a file system shared between containers and even EC2 instance.
Does that answer your question, Boond KW? By the way, thanks, folks, for helping fix my audio issues. Always have this audio thing with StreamYard and this particular mic. I don't know why. So
Solid Snake. StreamYard?
Yeah.
Question from Solid Snake 99. I'm preparing for the certification for Architect Professional exam. Any suggestion on how to better to increase my chance on passing? Yep.
Well, Seb used to go see Seb's videos on the certification exam. He used to run his show.
Yeah, it's in French, so I'm not sure. I run a couple of certification quiz on my YouTube channel before the summer holiday, but it's in French. So I'm not sure it will help. And it was not with professional level question; it was with associate level question. What are the tips?
First, so I know that if you pay like a small fee, Seb, you can take test exams. I think those are always good. And I'll tell you why. So I did pass Seb and myself used to work in the Alexa team before, in fact. And there's an Alexa specialty exam. And what really helped me was doing the test exams first, right? Because I had worked on Alexa a ton, so I knew everything. But the sort of questions that you get, you always want to sort of orient towards those sort of questions. And it's also always better to see, the sort of interface you'll have, the timing, the multiple choice, how big a question is. So those very small aspects, it really helps taking those couple of preparatory tests. I know it costs like, I think $15, $20, Seb, if I'm not mistaken. And like Solid Snake says, I do the practice. I think those really help.
Around that, I don't know the exact price. So yes, practice exam is one. On the certification website, there is also a couple of sample questions that you can download. Many people said that following course on Cloud Academy or Cloud Guru can help as well. These are really, really good training materials that you can use to get prepared. And of course, we have ours as well, so you can register to a training class delivered by AWS as well. I'm not sure the price is the same. It might be a bit more expensive, that one. But that's also a very good way to get a preparation. What I used to say, because I used to work for training before, so I used to deliver AWS class as well, and before joining Alexa. And for the professional exam, you really need hands-on experience, and there is nothing better than experience to prepare for this exam. With the associate, you can still study if you have good memory, if you understand correctly the concept. You can study, almost have no practice, and pass the exam. If you have a good memory, if you're able and train like a student is to pass an exam, if you're young enough to be close to your student years, you can do that with the associate. With the professional, it's much harder because the professional questions always combine multiple services. So in the question, it will not be about one service. How do I do this on S3? It will be a use case scenario, like you're working for a company that is using that and that and that. And so the question is much longer, longer. The responses are much longer. It takes time just to read that, so plan for enough of time as well, and have good time management during your exam. But it requires you to know multiple services. And with architecture, of course, you are going to find all the typical questions you can expect about serverless, managed services, a bit of networking, a bit of security. The breakdown between the different teams is also on the training and certification website. So practice, have experience, check a cloud guru, check Cloud Academy or Linux Academy for online trainings. Download the sample question from the website, take a practice exam. I think these are all tests. I'm not sure there is a book on certification at professional level.
I'm guessing. So can I give like a non-AWS specific tip, Seb? So at least what helped me when I wrote the Alexa specialty exam is some questions are designed to sort of be tricky, right? Seb said there will be some with multiple choices, and purely for the purpose of doing well in the exam, what helped me was to do process of elimination for the 4 choices. Some questions I didn't know the answer, or, I was like, hey, it could be one of these 2, but it definitely wasn't 2 for sure. Like 2 of the choices it wouldn't be. And then you could sort of work backwards from looking at the other 2 options, saying, hey, okay, now that I've narrowed it down to these 2, maybe I can work backwards and sort of see which answer fits better. And in terms of time, I think there is enough time. Most people in the room, I did it in a physical room, finished way before time. So did I. So, you can really take your time on each of those questions to sort of make sure. So Solid Snake 99. First of all, I'm guessing Metal Gear Solid fan. Nice name. So yes, good luck for your exam as well.
About the previous question about having a shared file system between containers and EC2, Solid Snake 99 also proposed that S3 might be a better option. And yes, the question was about file system, so I didn't answer with S3 because S3 is not a file system. As you know, it's an object storage. So depending on the use case, and you can bring back the "it depends" trademark there. It's coming. So depending on the use case, yes, S3 is probably a good option as well. For the majority of the use case, S3 will probably good enough and much easier to configure and much cheaper as well than the option we talk about. So I don't remember who asked the question, but yeah, let's consider S3. I know it requires you to change the code a bit because you cannot use your POSIX calls to open, write, read a file. You have to use S3 API. If I use S3, then how can I move it to the file share so users have access to the output file? That's something you can automate with S3. So with S3, you can put a trigger. It's a Lambda function. So every time a file is added on S3 or modified on S3, you can trigger a Lambda function that can do something with that file. Typical use case is to resize an image or a video. But we could imagine to mount, because now you have EFS access from Lambda, so to mount the EFS file system from Lambda and copy the S3 file to EFS. That would be a way to do it if you really need a file system. That would be one way to do it. But if you really need
S3 select, sorry, maybe using S3 select, if you can choose what data from the S3 your users want to access, is that a good option as well?
To be honest, that's a tricky question for me because I don't remember S3 select. S3 select, it's not to retrieve, like to query objects directly. S3 select, S3 select.
Perhaps. Because I know S3 select, you can retrieve like subsets of data from an S3 object. I don't know if this is the right use case for this.
Yes, but it's okay. It's SQL queries on S3 object to
SQL.
retrieve data from a CSV file.
Okay, sorry.
So that will not work, yeah.
That probably won't work, yeah, you're right.
Good one.
Cool. So we have another question from Coding Expedition. which is, would it be a good idea to provide how to successfully get certificated information via the Serverless Days community? Oh, okay. Coding Expedition organizes the Serverless Days Belgium.
Yes, I think if you address this type of question, that's a track or a session that will have a lot of success, because these are very frequently asked questions. How can I get prepared for a certification? Mostly associate level, but sometimes professional level as well. So yes, any type of content or guidance or tips and tricks will help the community to be better prepared for this type of exam. Just one word of cautions there. But maybe that's my AWS ad and the way we learn to talk about AWS in public. But don't advertise anything that gives the impression that you will pass the certification if you attend that session. There is no guarantee. It of course depends of the people. So just set the expectation correctly. But yes.
Yeah, I agree, Seb, because so Coding Expedition have actually been doing this office hours, I think, for the 15th straight week. And honestly, that's one of the most popular questions that we get. You know, hey, I'm studying for this exam. Do you have any tips? What can I do? Or I want to do this exam. Do you recommend any books and things like that? So yes, 100%. I think that is content that people will identify with, and they will definitely check it out. Cool. Let's see. So folks, hit us up with questions. Darko, our colleague, is here in the chats as well. Hey, Darko. Hope all is well. Do check out his Twitch channel. He has a lot of cool streams about things like CDK and a lot of infrastructure as code. A lot of that goes above my head, so I keep tuning in to learn from him. So do check it out. Very, very fun streams. Okay.
I know that nickname. Rub12.
Yeah, I wonder what the story behind that one is. We don't know. Maybe for another stream.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Seb, have you been checking out? Yes. Sorry.
I was going to ask to the people listening to us or watching us, anything cool you're doing with AWS right now? Tell us about your use case as well. I'm always curious to learn about what you are building, what you are inventing, what you are creating for your customers with AWS. Coding Expedition, are there already customer success stories, testimony for a full stack app with AWS Amplify that you know of? I made one podcast with a French startup. Their business case is to provide a place to share video. And you say, okay, another YouTube? No, not exactly. It's for professional video that wants to record, broadcast, publish, or sell a video to other professionals. So it's more like a B2B marketplace for video content. And the front-end app is entirely written on Amplify. If you speak French, it's in the French podcast that you can find on the AWS official website, but I never remember the URL. It's too long, so there is also a copy on my personal website, so you can find it there as well. And you will find that. I'm pretty sure there are others, but as you know, the technology is quite new, so most of the customers are using it to prototype, to get started very quickly with a new IDE. And if I can give an advice, is try to stick to the front end as much as possible. I know that Amplify allows you to create the API and the data model on DynamoDB, and it's great for that. But any more advanced business function, I would separate that, because usually you have the backend that will stay there for a couple of years, and the front end, it's something that changed depending on the technologies, on the fashion. On the summer, you have one stack. On the winter, you have another stack. back. And I hope Amplify I think Amplify will stay. But try to separate correctly your backend and front-end technology. What I'm using in some of my personal projects as well, I'm using Amplify to generate the backend, but I'm not using the Amplify library on the client side for a very good reason, because Amplify library, it's iOS, Android, JavaScript, and I'm currently working on a pure desktop application, like a macOS application. And so I cannot integrate the library on the client side, but I would love to have the analytic and the GraphQL server generated automatically for me. So I generate all that with the CLI, take the AWS Amplify config file, the JSON file. I wrote a bit of code to parse that file, and then I'm using the traditional SDK to call these services. But at least I don't have to manage and to configure these services. That's the great things of the Amplified CLI.
Yeah. Seb, quick question while we're on that topic, just out of curiosity. How different is it developing for Mac versus, say, iOS? Does it also use Swift, or does it use Objective-C like it used to?
No, it's written 100% in Swift programming language right now. I think they started directly from Swift. So the mobile libraries just got a major update just before the summer holiday. Before that, it was a thin layer on top of the mobile SDK, which was in Objective-C in iOS. It was in Java for Android, and it was a thin wrapper above the API. So it was quite low level. And the Amplify team decided to bring Amplify iOS and Android on par with the web version of Amplify. So now we have almost functional equivalence between iOS, Android, and web, with a brand new library written in the Swift programming language, and super easy to integrate into Swift applications.
Right. Yeah, I started my career in the early days building mobile apps, but that was all in Objective-C, which is a language not too many people are very fond of.
No.
Yeah.
I guess most of us, we had to learn Objective-C because we wanted to write an iOS app, and it was the only way at that time to do so, except with Cordova and this type of JavaScript things. But it was the only native way. And the syntax was so verbose, with the brackets and all these long names. Anyway, any AWS question? Front, back, container, machine learning, pure infrastructure. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And we are all happy to have Objective-C slowly disappearing.
Yeah.
It's an heritage from Next. Actually, macOS is from Next Step. Yes, macOS is the current version of the operating system created by a company created by Steve Jobs when he was fired from Apple, called Next. And
in fact, all of the like a button was like NS button, and all of the classes started with NS. So the longest time I was like, why is it called NS? And then I learned it was because of Next Step. Yeah.
I was a bit younger when Next was available. I was a student at that time, and I was dreaming in front of this computer where you can have a video running in a window and move the window, and the video continues to run in the window. Okay, it seems normal now, but at that time it was wow. And that object-oriented API, that was wow.
Yeah.
And now that's what we have in a Mac. A Mac is the current version, the 21st century version of a Next. Okay, this has nothing to do with AWS, sorry for.
Yeah, no, but it's insane to see how things have changed in such a short period of time. Like, for instance, I used to do a lot of workshops in universities back when I was in the Alexa team. So I used to speak about how we have gone from, like PC to the mobile era to voice and things like that. And when I used to talk about the early days of the internet, how you couldn't speak on your phone when the internet was connected, people thought I was joking and I was making it up. And then the teachers in the crowd used to be like, no, it's actually true, and kids have no clue that existed, where your internet was connected to your landline phone, your telephone. And kids have no clue about that. Like, okay.
I had the same discussion about floppy disk this morning.
Yeah.
Someone telling me, no, I understand that you had to label your floppy disk and put them in a box to find your application and your files. Now I understand why you are so strict in the way you name your directory and name your files, because you got some discipline from that time. And yeah, maybe she was right. You got some discipline from that time.
Yeah, kids, the save icon that you see, that is a floppy disk. If you 3D print the save icon, that would be a floppy disk. Yeah.
There is a joke. There is a meme on the internet about that, saying, "Oh, that's cool. You print the save icon."
Yeah.
No, it's the opposite. Come on, don't hesitate. We are still there for half an hour, a bit less. Please ask any question you want to hear about AWS certification, account security, containers, Lambda, Sam.
Yeah, we have a question about Amplify again, Seb.
So you mentioned Amplify AppSync GraphQL auth directive that can limit your data access. Do you know how that works behind the scene? Yes, and it's not hidden actually. So the auth directive is directly translated in something that we call AppSync Resolver. A resolver is the native way in a GraphQL server, so it's not specific to AWS, to go from whatever type of request the API server receives to whatever backend you have. So the resolver is actually where you put some kind of logic inside AppSync to take the parameter that you receive from the client call, and you use something to call a backend. In that case, it's DynamoDB. So on AppSync, we decide to not let you, at least at the beginning, it recently changed, but I will come to that in a second. In AppSync, we decide to implement Resolver as a template because we go from JSON that we receive to JSON that we send to DynamoDB or to another type of backend. So it was just a simple template mechanism using the Apache, I forgot the name now, but one of the Apache library for templating. And so the templates are generated for you based on these directives that you give inside your schema. If you put an auth schema, you can open your AppSync console, you go into the resolver part, and you will see the resolvers that have been generated. This is where the filtering will happen based on the role, the groups, if the user is authenticated or not, and how we map these arguments to the DynamoDB query, and how, so that's the resolver to go to DynamoDB, and then there is another resolver to go back from DynamoDB, where we do the same. We take the JSON taken from DynamoDB, apply some filtering in the resolver, and send you the JSON back. So that's how auth is implemented, and it's not hidden. Once again, go to the AppSync console, search your data source. No, it's at the resolver at the operation level. So search for your specific mutation or query operation, and then you will see the resolver. There is a resolver button. You click on that, and you will see that. There is a change since a few weeks ago. We also authorized Lambda Resolver. And ta-da! So it's not there in Amplify yet, but if you configure your AppSync gateway manually, no, you are not limited, because it was some kind of limitation, to JSON templates. Now you can call a Lambda that will do whatever you can do in a Lambda and then return result. And that opens the world to tons of different things, because, okay, we had the concept of relational database in the backend, and we have a resolver to address that as well. But with Lambda, you can literally call anything. If you have external systems that have an API, if you have third-party systems, let's imagine Salesforce, anything that you can call from Lambda, you can call that and just return the JSON to AppSync. And now you can front-end with a GraphQL API any type of resource. So I guess there will be tons of innovation coming from that side, because it opens a whole new world to GraphQL API. The resolver then first queries for all items and the filter the result based on the owner filter to be checked. I don't remember the details. There are two different ways to implement that, but that's one way to implement. The other is to send the correct query to DynamoDB and to filter at the DynamoDB level. I think it's the second, because that approach would be a bit a waste of resource if we have to retrieve all the results from DynamoDB. That might be too much. But yeah, I don't remember the implementation details, but just go and check how the resolver is working.
Yeah. So speaking of which, Seb, yesterday Darko, myself, and Javier were doing an AMA, and someone asked us this question, and Coding Expedition, we'll come to your question in a bit, but and to be honest, we didn't know. I have worked a bit on Amplify and GraphQL, but I didn't know if the auth actually impacts the performance of the data source, right? And the exact question, because I didn't copy paste it, was, does Amplify auth impact performance when reading data from a database, maybe by filtering on your own owner field?
At some point it does. I don't know how much, because as I said, it depends where is the filtering done. Are we sending a query to DynamoDB and DynamoDB will return only our items? Or DynamoDB is returning a much larger set, which is filtered on AppSync, then the performance impact would be much larger. So that's an important question. Thank you for asking. we need to go see how they implement the auth filtering in the resolver. Let me check. I have a couple of API here. Maybe if I can find something. I can share my screen. And to the other question about, is it VTL? When I say I forgot the name, I really forgot the name. So yes, it might be VTL. Velocity. Yeah, that's it. So the template is the Velocity templating engine. So Velocity is an Apache project to do templates. Templates, it's a JSON file that you transform into another JSON file, and inside your template you put some condition like if this then that, or you can loop to generate arrays of elements inside JSON and stuff like that. But that's the maximum type of processing you can have from the template. So I have here. It's been a while since I'm searching on my screen right now. I will share my screen if I find something interesting. Yeah. I'm searching the query. Voila. And here I have a resolver, so we can have a look at the resolver. I think it's a bad example because there is no authentication inside that resolver. Let me search on another API.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, folks, again, for those of you all joining in, if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up on chat. We have Sebastian here, who's an expert in all things AWS, and we'll try to get to as many questions. We have about 18 more minutes to go, so it's a lot of time. But yeah, thanks for your questions, Coding Expedition, and good luck with the serverless days Belgium as well.
Do not hesitate to contact us for that. We can help, not by providing speaker, because it's not the idea of these. We prefer it's community speaker that will speak at this event, but just to play on the networking, on the agenda, try to put you in touch with other people, and of course for the marketing of that as well. I will share my screen. I'm not sure I understand everything I have on my screen, but we can at least show some part of it. And let's try to see that together. First, I will go back one step to show you how can I share my screen. There, select window or screen, just a window. That will be good enough. That's Slack, no. That's StreamYard, yes. Okay, we might have a nice effect like that.
There we go.
Okay. So here I'm in the AppSync Console, and I have a my app Android dev schema, which is a very simple schema to create nodes and query nodes. And that schema is authenticated because I want the user to only retrieve his node and not all the nodes. So it's pretty much the use case you're asking for. This is a schema that has been generated by Amplify, because my original schema is much easier than that. I don't know if we can find the original somewhere here. But basically, my schema is that a node has an ID, a name, a description, an image, and Amplify is adding create, add, update, add, and owner, the famous owner field that we are talking about. Then here on the right side, you see the resolver. So for each attribute, you can have a resolver, and for each method, you can have a resolver. Sorry, for each for fields and for methods, you can attach a resolver. So here I have my CRUD, create, update, delete, and a bit here I have get node data, and that's the one I was looking at. So that's the resolver that has been generated by Amplify. There are two resolvers. This one is a request, so that's the one going to the database. And as you see, there is not so much filtering there. Basically, we just transform the JSON into a DynamoDB JSON with an utility function, which is provided by AppSync. And so it looks like the filtering happens on the backend side. We check if there is an auth mode, if there is an identity, if there is a person in that identity. But basically, you see that they start to have like if we have an allow owner, and for each owner, we start to do something like put a is owner authorized through. So that's just positioning variables that will be used a bit later. Why we have that twice? Yes, if it is a list or if it is a string, so if we have multiple owner or one owner. Then we check the group. Is it a static group, a dynamic group, owner authorized? If it is not of these, it's unauthorized. And then it filters, it generates the result. The part that I don't see here is the filtering, but from what I see there, it's the authorization check is made at the resolver level. It's not made at the DynamoDB level. If you disagree with that, Darko, so on, let me know. I'm still missing a part there. It's okay. It positions variables, great, but then where the filtering on the content is done, I don't know. Maybe it's that util function which is doing that based on these value. Or maybe it's an example without filtering because it's just checking if we have authorization. Yeah, okay. Here, I'm sorry, I lead you to a bad direction. Here, I'm looking at the resolver for the get data, so get one item. So basically what it does is, are you authorized to get that item, yes or not? There is no filtering. It gets the item from DynamoDB, and the resolver check if I'm authorized or not. If I'm not, it generate unauthorized. If I am, it converts the JSON. So here there is no filtering. I mean, yes, there is filtering. There is filtering for one item. So it doesn't really impact the performance as you mentioned. So let's have a look at the other one, the list, because this one will be more interesting. So list node. Yep. And okay. Yep, and here we see that the preparation of the DynamoDB query is much more complicated because it manages paging. So the paging is done by DynamoDB. Next token is the token they use to go from one page of result to the other. When I say paging, I mean DynamoDB returns you the first 20, and then you ask for the next 20 and something like that. And you use a token to show where you are. This is where the filtering is made as well. And based on the type of query you are going to do, it's going to do a query, so to query specific subset of the data in the table, or do a full table scan as well. Yeah, if there is no model query expression, it do a full table scan. But otherwise, it's preparing for the pagination, doing a query, doing some sorting, ascending or descending, scan index forward, or true or false there. So the resolver delegates to DynamoDB part of the query. And then we have the response, where once again we check the authorization model, check if the group, if the user is authorized, And then there is still a for each item. Yes, so looks like DynamoDB is going to return a long list of items, and it's the resolver that is going to filter based on if the group or the owner authorize. If it is that, then we add the item to the list of response that we are going to send. Okay, sorry, it was a long, detailed explanation. If I have to answer the question, let me see the question again. If I stop sharing my screen, the question was the resolver then first query for all items and filter the result based on the owner field. Yes, this is my understanding at looking at the resolver. Template equal VTL. Yes, you saw the VTL. Question from yesterday about the auth piece of Amplify impact the performance of the data source. It depends what you call the data source. Impact the performance of DynamoDB? No. It impacts the latency inside AppSync? Yes, because it has more work to do inside the resolver. I think it's done in the query that is sent to DynamoDB because the REST template didn't see the filtering. That's true. In your Amplify directory, you should see these resolver templates, but the filtering is done on the query coming back from DynamoDB, not going to DynamoDB. That's probably where you didn't find it. Okay, we talk a lot about AppSync and Amplify.
Yeah, right. We'll have to climb up above the question.
Okay, as we want to allow our user to record and upload video from the browser or mobile app and send them to their family for playback, I know I can use Media Convert for transcoding S3 for storage, but how can I secure the file so that only the recipient can view it? And do you also have media players for mobile and web? Okay, let me take the second part of the question. Do we have mobile player for media and for mobile and web? No, I don't think so. No, you have to use third-party libraries for mobile player. The way to share files with a group of people, again, it depends exactly of your specification and your requirement, exactly how secure it has to be. But an easy way to achieve your use case would be to, of course, you store the file in a private bucket, a bucket only accessible to your user. You can create a bucket policy with a variable that contains the Cognito ID of the user. So for example, if you create subdirectory, I don't like to talk about directories in S3 because it's not really a directory, but okay, we agree it's not a directory, but I will use the word directory because it's the easiest way to explain that. But if you create one subdirectory per user and the name of the directory is the Cognito user ID, the sub, cognito.sub, then you can create a policy that will say that access to that directory, that prefix, is granted only if your Cognito ID is the name of the Cognito ID in the directory. And that way, you restrict access to your sub-bucket only to the owner of the file. You ensure that if someone else authenticates with Cognito, it will not have permission to access someone else's folder. Am I clear?
In this, I think what Max Payne Life is saying is only the recipient should get it.
So I'm coming to that. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So it's a combination of two things. The first thing is to restrict access to the owner of the file, so that he can only write to his subdirectory and not another directory. For the access of the file, especially Max, you say it's a one-to-one access. The easiest is to generate a pre-signed URL. So if you have an access key and secret key, you can call a function from the SDK that generates a URL, an S3 URL, with the correct parameter behind. So a temporary access key, a temporary secret key, valid only for a period of time. And that URL, anyone that has access to that URL will be able either to read or to upload, depending on you prepare the URL to that location. So if you want to prepare a URL for someone to upload, you generate the URL on the back end, You send the URL on the front end, and the front end can upload to that URL. And you can make the signature lifetime very short, like 1 minute, for example. So even if the person managed to steal the URL and share that on social network, after 1 minute, the URL will not be valid anymore. And you can do the same for reading. If I want to share a file with Sohan, I will put the file on my private bucket. I will generate a pre-signed URL for that file with a specific duration, and I will send the URL to Sohan. He will be able to download that file for the period of validity of the URL, which I think by default it's 1 hour, but you can do that. There is a maximum duration, which is not very long, so it's not a good idea to rely on that for months, for example. That's very easy because that function is in the SDK. The only thing is that the URL is public. No, the URL is not public. You can hide it. But I mean, anyone having access to the URL can access the file. And maybe that's a requirement that you cannot do, you cannot afford. And so that's why I said it really depends on your requirement. But for the majority of the application, file sharing application, for example, pre-signed URL is the way to go. I think I have an example of a pre-signed URL on my GitHub. It's a very, very old example, but I checked recently.
So, Seb, this might be a basic question, but is it an option to have like a Cognito in front of like something that gives you access? So you have like a sign-in procedure. So if I want to send a file to you, you have to sign in, and then you get some sort of...
Yeah, that's why I said it depends on the requirement. If you really want to log down things, then you require both the producer of the file and the reader of the file to be authenticated in the app. And then you can really find a fine-grained control on who can access what on your S3 bucket. But then it requires the destination to be authenticated as well.
Right.
That's an example. I think it's in, no, I don't think, I'm sure it's in Python. I hope it's work. If it's not, just open an issue on GitHub or let me know on Twitter, and I will fix. The reason why it might not work is because I wrote that several years ago, and sometimes there are a couple of changes, but it should work. Do I need a Cloudfront for one-to-one access if I want to allow for streaming read access? It depends. So the advantage of Cloudfront is that the recipient will have lower latency access to the file, because he will access the AWS network from one of the entry points close to where he lives. So there is an entry point in Amsterdam, there is one in Brussels, there is one in Paris, there is none in Luxembourg, if anyone watching us from Luxembourg, not yet. But from there, the traffic will go over the AWS managed network, which is very low latency, high bandwidth. So even if you are not using caching, you can do the test. Most of the time, the access is faster through Cloudfront than if you go directly to the S3 bucket. So yes. Haven't used Cognito before. We have our own Django user-based access. Do I need something? Yeah, that's the fun I'm working with right now. Like I explained at the beginning of this episode, in my scenario, it's not with Django. It's with login with Google or signing with Apple in mobile application. Yes, so if Django is giving you a token, you can implement in Cognito what we call custom authentication. And basically, with a custom authentication, it's a bunch of Lambda function that Cognito will call at authentication time to delegate the verification of the credentials. So by default, Cognito will verify a username password against its own database of username and password. But you can have a Lambda function in the game there. And so your application calls Cognito saying, I have a custom authentication, and by the way, this is my Django token. Cognito calls your Lambda function. The Lambda function will verify the validity of the Django token. How? I don't know, that's your thing. And return, yes, it's valid, or no, it's invalid. And if the Lambda function returns yes, then Cognito assumes that the authentication is succeed, and Cognito will issue its own token to your application. So you will have, with this token, you can trade them for an access key, secret key to access S3, or you can call API gateway or AppSync. In reality, it's a bit more complex than that, because there are multiple back and forth between Cognito and your Lambda function. There are multiple steps in that custom authentication. But at high level, it's exactly what I said. It's your Lambda function that will ultimately decide if the token is valid or not. I have a sample code running in Python that validates Apple token right now. I'm happy to share that. It's not on GitHub yet because it's not polished and finished the way I would like to, but ultimately it will be on my GitHub. And the last question is, the last, I mean, yeah, maybe it will be the last because it's free. And so can I use Elemental Media Convert to transcode to enable streaming output or to store S3 for streaming access? And I don't need Cloudfront. That I don't know, seriously. So I don't know Elemental Media Convert enough. I know we have solutions there that helps to transcode media file at very large scale, but I didn't look at the details. So sorry on that one.
Yeah. But about Cloudfront, like Seb said, Max Payne Live, you don't have to use it. It's not a requirement, but if you use it, you will get lesser latency for your customers. So it's not a necessity, but it's good if you use it, of course. Cool.
You're welcome. Happy. That's why we are there.
Yes.
And if you want more details about the Cognito stuff, just ping me on Twitter. The Twitter is on the screen there, Sepsto. I will show you a practical example how to implement custom authentication on Cognito.
Thanks, Coding Expedition. And thank you all of you all for joining in and viewing this. Thank you, Seb, for attending Benelux Tech Office Hours. Always a pleasure. I learn a lot from this listening to you. So thanks again.
My pleasure. It's great that we got a lot of questions on the things I'm currently working on, which is Cognito, Amplify, and this type of thing. So great.
And folks, we have modern application development dev day coming up soon. Both Seb and myself, among other amazing evangelists, are giving talks. Do check it out. Register. It's on October 15th. A lot of deep dive tech talks there. It's all like a level 300 and above. So if you want some hardcore tech, this is the place for you to go. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks again, Seb. Thanks for viewing. See you next week again. We're doing one on AI ML at the same time, same place, same channel. Until then, see you safe, stay healthy. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.